This is Chris Eubank Jr.'s next opponent, Marcus Morrison. I always think of Mark Morrison, the guy from back in the days, Return to the Mac and all that. That's where Tyson Fury likes that song. Chris Eubank's next opponent, Marcus Morrison, 23-3, 16 KOs. He was being touted as somewhat of a prospect a couple years ago, but he's taken some losses and he's pretty much been drifting around in the wilderness since. He stepped up back in 2017, you can see here, against Jason Wellborn, lost that fight on a UD. Then he lost to Tyan Booth on points. I think that was over 4 rounds. Then he lost to Alistair Warren. I mean, that's a real hard loss to lose to a guy who's 10-18-4. He's strung some wins together since then, but they've been against pretty nondescript opposition. And he's a middleweight. I'm not signed in here at the moment, so I'm not sure if he's been a middleweight all his career, Marcus Morrison. I'm going to assume he has. But on paper, this should be a walk in the park for Chris Eubank Jr., shouldn't it? He's fought at a much higher level than this. I mean, the guys who Marcus Morrison lost to, Eubank Jr. obviously stopped Tyan Booth, and Tyan Booth says that he was winning that fight, and many people agree. Jason Wellborn and Alistair Warren, would you pick either of those guys against Chris Eubank Jr.? Chris Eubank Jr. has fought at a much higher level. He's beaten better guys than Morrison has beaten, that's for sure. No question about that. He's beat people like Chudinov, the lesser of the two Chudinov brothers. Beat Spike O'Sullivan and a bunch of other people, Nick Blackwell. So he's at least beat people at British level, European level. Yeah, I want to say British and European level. That's the level Eubank Jr. has beat people at. Arthur Abraham was a world champion once upon a time, but he was very much faded by the time Eubank Jr. fought him. So I want to say that was maybe European level as well. Now, Eubank Jr. has fought at world level against Billy Joe and against George Groves, but he didn't succeed. So we can say he's succeeded at European level. Marcus Morrison hasn't even succeeded at domestic level thus far. So Eubank Jr. should be way too much for him. And as I say, on paper, this should be a straightforward affair for Chris Eubank Jr. as long as he's got his eyes on the prize and he's focused. Because, sometimes when you fight somebody who isn't really on your level and you have a tendency towards overconfidence, when you're that kind of personality, disaster can strike. I know Eubank Jr. is a diligent trainer and all that, but yeah, sometimes people just get way, way, way too carried away with their own egos, believing that they're invincible, at least against certain opponents, and things can go horribly wrong. But as long as Eubank Jr. is motivated and comes into this fight with the right mindset and he's serious, then he should be able to take care of Marcus Morrison without too many issues, with relatively comfortably. Now, there's a lot of talk about the card at the moment, and it doesn't look good right now. I mean, you got Derek Chisora, Joseph Parker, which is a good fight. Is it pay-per-view fair? End of the day, if people are willing to pay, then it's pay-per-view. But will you guys be willing to pay for this? Me personally, I'm not paying for it. And normally I pay for pay-per-view shows. Yeah, I pay for the big Matchroom shows, the BT Sports shows and so on. If they're good enough, I pay for them. But this, to me, at the moment, is not good enough for me to pay for. Chisora Parker's a good fight, but doesn't exactly set my world on fire. Dimitri Bivol versus Craig Richards. Yeah, Bivol's a great fighter. Craig Richards really up against it. Very unproven. So, Katie Taylor versus Natasha Jonas. Chris Eubank Jr. versus Marcus Morrison. So they're going to need to add a lot more, I think, to this card to make it worth my while to stick a hand in my pocket and actually pay for it. If they can get maybe Babic on there in a good fight, a couple other guys on there, then maybe I might consider it. I do like Babic. And shout out to Devin again. I keep on forgetting the name of the fighter who Devin suggested Babic could take on in his next bout. And the guy is James the Beast Wilson. I'd like to see Alan Babic versus James the Beast Wilson. If whoever, Dylan White, Eddie Hearn can get that made. If you can get it trending on Twitter or Instagram or whatever social media people are using these days. Yeah, the Savage versus James the Beast Wilson. I know the Savage is coming back from some type of injury, so I don't know whether he wants a lively opponent. Knowing the kind of character that Savage is, he'll want to be thrown in there at the deep end right away, even if he's coming back from an injury. So let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. Eubank Jr. taking on Marcus Morrison. Is that as straightforward as it would seem on paper? And let me know what you guys think about the rest of the card. Is it disappointing? Is it worth you paying money for? Let me know.